You are listening to the Sirens of Audio because I, Davros, commanded it. Pay attention, or you will be exterminated!
G'day audiophiles, this is the Sirens of Audio, the show that explores the universe of Doctor Who in the audio medium, plus other cult TV from time to time. I'm Dwayne.
And I'm Philip. G'day, Dwayne. G'day, audiophiles.
Philip, it's good to be back with you, as always.
And it's great to be with you, as always, as well.
Thank you, Philip. Today on the episode, we have a wonderful guest. We're going to be talking with one of the actors who played Davros. And he played Davros in the 1979 story Destiny of the Daleks. That is none other than David Gooderson. He also appeared in 3 episodes of Sarah Jane Smith Series 2 for Big Finish. So we'll be talking about both of those things throughout our chat, plus getting lots of history from him as well. But first, let's talk about our live events coming up in October. Who have we got?
Well, in October, we have Carol Ann Ford, the very first Doctor's granddaughter. I'm sure people are getting bored with hearing this. So we can't do this every single week till October. Probably not. Well, maybe we can. Who knows? Yes, Carol Ann Ford in Sydney.
We can do whatever we
want. We can do whatever we want. She's in fine form. I was chatting with her recently. She's really excited, like so excited to be coming out to Australia. She's got lots of things planned, and we've got lots of things planned for her. And she's got lots of stories to tell, both from her time on Doctor Who, when the show first started as the only surviving member of the cast, and one of the very, very few surviving people from when the show started at all, anyhow. So she's got amazing stories to tell there. She's got stories to tell about the 5 Doctors when she came back, other bits and pieces she's done for the show. But of course, most recently, in the episodes that she recorded in the final season, even though she found out that her part had been cut when Russell T rang her up a couple of days before the final broadcast. But there's going to be lots of stories to tell about that as well. So, and a few other surprises we might have in terms of her return or non-return or future return. There's lots of stories to tell. So she's going to be amazing.
Very good.
Then in November, we have for those of you who love Blake 7, and if you love Doctor Who, you'd love Blake 7. So if you don't, at the moment, watch Blake 7, start watching it. Because we also have a new podcast. We'll announce that soon too. A new podcast coming out that we're going to be starting. Dwayne, we're mad. What can I say? But anyhow, we have Sally Navette coming out to Australia. She played Jenna in the first 2 seasons. Arguably the best 2 seasons of the show. I don't know. I have a fondness for. Actually, I love the whole show. But Jenna, she was in the first 2 seasons. Sally Navette's coming out. And yeah, she's looking forward to coming to Australia. I think it's been over 20 years since anyone from Blake 7 has been in Australia. And she has some amazing stories to tell as well. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. She'll be in Sydney and Melbourne and New Zealand. So our New Zealand listeners, she's going to New Zealand as well.
Excellent. Details for that at sirensofaudio.com, of course. And I was going to mention the Blake 7 podcast because you did announce it at our last live events with Matthew Woodhouse. That was a few months ago now. People have been asking. Where is this?
Yes.
Where is this mythical podcast? It is coming. Fear not. It is on
we
the
are
way.
Recording episodes in the school holidays coming up. So the aim is to have 2 or 3 episodes recorded during the school holidays. They're going to come out. There'll be a monthly episode that comes out, but there'll also be a fortnightly bonus interviews and bits and pieces with some amazing guests. You're going to be very impressed by some of the people we'll be talking to, aside from the fact of amazing content from Dwayne and myself. Also, Chris Beer, that some of you have known from some other places as well, and Todd Bilby. So the 4 of us will be offering commentary and discussion, plus a number of guests will be joining us along the way, and special guests to come and offer their contributions as well. It's going to be a fun-packed, information-ridden podcast, and I can't wait to get it started.
Ridden. I like that. Fantastic.
Like worm-ridden, I was thinking.
Before we chat with David Gooderson, there is one thing we need to do, Philip. Do you know what?
Oh, yes, if we have to. My brain's not working though.
Yes,
but
let's
okay.
jump down the rabbit hole. Okay, of course, with David Gooderson playing Davros, I want to make the rabbit hole topic about Davros. And we've had 1, 2, 3, 5 Davroses on screen, but I'm only going to count 4. I'm only going to count the wheelchair Davroses.
Well, Julian Bleach was
Not
still
the other
Julian
ones.
Bleach. It was still Julian Bleach.
No. I'm talking about the boy.
Oh, okay.
Don't forget, he was Davros too.
On
Now,
television, because we're not including the other radio one, are we? In the Davros series, in episode 1, there's a young Davros there too.
Of
I think who the
course.
actor was.
Yeah, no, this is TV only, because David Gooderson has only played Davros on TV. So I want to go through each of the 4 main TV Davroses, and I want pros and cons about their particular performance. So something you like, something you think doesn't work, or maybe you think the performance is perfect and you can't pick a con. So let's start with the quintessential Michael Wisher. What are the pros for Michael Wisher?
What does quintessential mean? It was the first anyway. Can I say? I mean, as a kid, I could not tell the difference between all the Davroses. I must confess, I hadn't realised that Michael Wisher, David Gooderson, and Terry Malloy. I hadn't realised the Davroses had changed actors, which I don't know what that says about me. I was young, I guess, but to me, I really couldn't tell. For me, it was just the character, and so I believed the character, even though the actors changed behind. Now, as an adult going back, I can see differences in the performances. But really at the time, I had no idea that we had changed actors. So could you tell the actors had changed when you were a kid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I could. It was the voices more than anything.
Okay. Well, there you go. Well, I mean, Michael Wisher, what an amazing performance. He really does kick off the role. I think the thing about Michael is he manages to be so sinister and so evil. And I mean, I guess the scene with Tom Baker and the file, to hold in my hand, that whole scene is just terrifying. To realize that life means nothing to him. All that matters is the experiment and the power, and to be like a god. And in that sense, and the thing is, he's not mad. Michael Wisher's performance is not mad. He's just unbelievably rational. And to see that sort of rational performance and the belief that to destroy all life for the sake of just being able to do it would be worthwhile is terrifying. Because you'd like to know he was mad. The fish people, I can't even think of the episode called Underwater Menace, and they are nothing in the world can stop me now. I mean, that's a character who's gone insane when he wants to destroy the world. Davros isn't insane. He just loves the thought of having control like that and ultimate control over the life of all people. And that to me is just such a terrifying performance.
Yeah. You would kind of wonder whether his disfigurement and the injuries that he suffered have a large part to play in that madness as well. Well, not madness.
Well, see, I don't think he's rational. I don't think he's mad at all, which is why it's so terrifying. I think it's ultimate.
Well, the development of evil, perhaps. The unfairness of that pain that he suffered as a result of that. We hear a lot of that in the Big Finish stories. They sort of really expand on his injuries and the torture that he went through up to that point is astounding, really. But for me, as far as Michael Wisher goes, I guess the pros are exactly what you said, and the cons are that he only did it once. There you go. That's my con. It would have been great to see him return, but unfortunately, it wasn't to be. It was just that one off. And as I've said previously, my first introduction to Genesis of the Daleks was through the LP version. So very heavily focused on condensing all the Davros scenes in there. So, and I think, oh no, it ends on the Dalek, doesn't it? I thought it might have ended on a Davros speech, but that where Davros is being confronted by the Daleks, that's where the LP finishes, and when he gets shot at the end of that, it's a very impactful recording, that LP version of Genesis. So yeah, all right, let's move on to David Gooderson. Let's get some pros and cons for David.
Yeah, I saw the con. I think the con was the mask. The fact that they were too cheap to make him his own mask. I think he suffered from having to wear Michael Wish's mask over his head is because it just didn't quite fit properly, and I think therefore that probably made it harder.
And it was 5 years, wasn't it?
It was 5 years. So yes, it's a 5-year-old mask being dumped somewhere. They probably just washed it out with a bit of soapy water and handed it to him. It probably could have done with a whole remolding, refitting, and retightening. I think it would have helped his performance in terms of being able to have a bit more control. For me, Gooderson's performance is a bit more. It's less evil, but a bit more manipulative. I think in terms of he doesn't trust his creatures anymore. I mean, Michael Wish's performance, he fully trusts his creatures. He doesn't recognise until the very end they're going to betray him. David Gooderson knows that they can't be trusted. He knows what he's created. He has plans for how it's going to change. And so you can see him slightly more manipulating what's going on. And even all the suicide Daleks is sort of a way to thin them out to cause less danger for him down the track. And he also recognises that he has power in terms of with the Marvellans and that they need him. And so I think that gives him a different sort of level of arrogance. So even though Michael has hubris with his creation, doesn't recognise the fact that his creation will turn on him, David Gooderson's performance, having had them turn on him, it's now more about how does he manage to contain power and keep the upper advantage. And so I think it's played with a slightly different dynamic for that reason. What do you think, Dwayne?
Well, Destiny of the Daleks has a very special place in my heart because obviously when I started my off-air video recording collection, I started with the Robots of Death, so Genesis was way back before that. So it was the first Davros that I had in my collection that I could watch over and over again. So I did do that, and I loved his performance. There's one particular line that he delivers that's so quintessentially David Gooderson, and that's where he kind of slyly says to the Fourth Doctor, he goes, "So you see, there's nothing you can do to stop it now." It's something that Michael Wisher would never have delivered in that same way, and I think it's something that is very. What's the word I'm looking for? It's very defined in that particular characterization of Davros. So I like that. I like the fact that the director left. There's a scene where David's going through and you can actually see him pedaling. I thought that was funny, but that sort of fits in with the funny kind of
the feet on the sand,
the whole of season 17. yeah, the Daleks too. So, but I guess they were, by season 17, the budget was shot. So
it was
even worse than the previous years. So they did the best they could with what they had. And yeah, I thought it was very good. Very, very complex, like sort of condensed, like full of different things, not just Davros and the Daleks, but the Marvellans too, set on Skaro itself, I mean, so there was a lot there's a lot to jam in there.
Yeah, and Davros are those that he becomes the main focus point of the episode. You don't know he's there till the end of episode 2. It's a growing dread of what are the Daleks doing here, because you don't know it really is a Dalek story, which then Davros enters, whereas Genesis Daleks is a Davros story where the Daleks enter. So
yes.
Michael Wisher has 6 whole episodes to develop his character, and the Daleks play a very minor role in the story, really. Whereas in Death of the Daleks, it's a Dalek story, and they're up to something, and you've got the Marvellans, but it takes you a while to actually realise, it's Davros they're after. And so Davros only comes into the fore for the last 2 episodes. So it's hard to get a big performance, and it's such a memorable performance. I think David's done an amazing job to get such a memorable performance out of 2 episodes, so that he's still fondly remembered, considering what Terry Malloy would later do with all his stories, and Michael Wisher had in six whole episodes.
And that's the thing too. It hadn't been established at this point that Davros was going to appear in every consecutive story from then until the end of the classic series. So it was probably more of a surprise to see him at the end of episode 2. Think, wow, here's Davros back again. But it would become maybe
it was a shock when he was there. I remember because Des the Daleks is one of the first seasons. No, actually, it would have been the season before. But one of the new seasons of I was watching Doctor Who for the first time rather than just repeats going over. And I still remember when Davros appears at the end of that second episode. I mean, the first cliffhanger with the Dalek bursting through the glass with Romana terrified the life out of me, because that was just a beautiful build-up of tension. And you got the Daleks at the end of the first episode, and then you got Davros at the end of the second episode. As much as there's a lot of production faults with Death of the Daleks, I love it as a story. I really do. I think it's a great story.
Yeah, me too.
I need to watch it again.
Let's move on. Let's move to Terry Malloy. Some pros and cons. Can I start with this one?
Yeah, okay.
Terry Malloy, for me, is my personal nostalgic favourite Davros because of season 22. It was Revelation of the Daleks, in particular, his performance in that really cemented me as a Doctor Who fan for life. I thought he was so scary in his role. The laughs that he would cackle throughout that first episode, and he was very malevolent throughout that whole story. I was, and by the time you get to the end and realize that he's a clone, and then the actual Davros comes out in his chair at the end, was surprising for me as well. But I saw season 22 when it went out. I never saw Resurrection. So when I went through that run that I was recording off the television and got to Resurrection, boy, I was excited to see Davros there, because I knew it was Terry Malloy coming. I wonder how it would have been if Michael Wisher, which is what J&T wanted to do, isn't it? He wanted Michael Wisher to come back for that, but didn't get him, because the mask had been destroyed by then, so they would have had to do a new one. I wonder if it had been similar. I don't know. As far as cons, perhaps, I don't know. It's hard because he's my favourite. But maybe by the time Remembrance came out, I don't know, maybe Remembrance may have been just as good without him. It was unnecessary for him to be there. I don't know. Because if they're going to do an Emperor Dalek in Remembrance, they could have just had the Emperor Dalek. They didn't need to have Davros. But I mean, it did deliver some iconic lines between the Seventh Doctor and him at the end of that episode. I just thought at the time, I remember thinking, if they're going to have Davros, why only have him in for a few minutes instead of, having him in for more of the story? So, what do you think?
Well, probably Terry Malloy is probably my favourite Davros as well. But in part, that's been driven because of the Big Finish stories. Because, of all the Big Finish stories, and he has done some amazing Big Finish stories. Davros itself probably being an Davros, but he's done some amazing stuff, and not enough, actually. I'd love to have more Davros. For me, I think why I enjoy his performance so much is it's slightly more manic, and so he gets hysterical at times, and that amuses me, this hysterical, manic performance, which is just over the top. So whereas Michael Wisher had been so rational and with his evilness, and David had played it far more contemplatively and mysteriously, with Michael Wisher, with Terry Malloy, you suddenly have this manic, angry, determined, fundamentalist performance, which is just freaky. And he can turn from being cool. I don't think he's ever warm and friendly ever in any of his performances, even when he's slightly playing slightly less manic. I'm thinking, with Wendy Padbury, he's sort of trying to be kind, but even so, he's never quite kind. But when he can actually turn then this performance where it goes so angry and just this fear that he can instill in people. So I love his performance. I don't think I want to say weakness. I don't know particularly. I love him in Revelation. Remembers the Daleks. Is it necessary? Probably not. But it's a nice little surprise at the end to have him there. And in terms of he was trying to create the fact that you've got this civil war happening between the Daleks. Well, you know from the previous story that was Davros trying to set up his own creation.
He was doing
that. So I
Yeah.
don't have any problems with that. So I'm happy with his performance in that. As I said, to me, he just has gelled it with his Big Finish performances.
It's hard to find cons, is it? Because they're all good. It's a great character. So
it is a great character.
Yeah. So what about Julian Bleach? What did you think of his performance when he appeared in season 4 of the new series?
Yeah, well, Julian Bleach I really like. I mean, I really enjoyed the Sarah Jane Smith Adventures originally because he plays a really freaky character in that. And I've got a feeling he does something in Torchwood too, but certainly Sarah Jane, he freaked me out in that. I think Julian Bleach very much goes back to a Michael Wisher type performance. Although there is signs of the madness there, it is once again the naivety of he thinks he's in control with the Daleks. I mean, he's done 2 performances, hasn't he? Once again, they're quite different performances. Stolen Earth performance is, as I said, a bit naive in terms of thinking he's got control. Though it's interesting that when you come back for It's Not a Sign of the Daleks, Magician's Apprentice, he really does have a lot more influence there. I know a lot of people were very offended by the Doctor taking him out of his life support system and getting in it and riding around it. To me, that was just very funny, and just the Davros on the floor. But once again, the sympathy he tries to give you in that, and he actually opens his eyes, and there's a tear in his eyes, and then you realise, oh no, he's manipulated the Doctor so brilliantly. So Julian really plays able to manipulate in a very different way. And he's actually able to build trust. The Doctor actually does build some trust into him, which is bizarre. But he does manage to do that in his performance. But I think Julian does a great job. And in fact, I can't imagine. I think Michael Wisher, I think, would be too hard to bring back. I think he's probably a bit too old to manage the part in the chair. I think vocally he can still do it. I think Julian Bleach was perfect casting for Davros when they brought him back.
Do you mean Terry Malloy?
No. Oh, sorry. Terry Malloy was a bit too old. Vocally he could have done it, but I think it would have been a bit hard to bring him back in the new series. But I think Julian is an amazing recast for the new series.
I agree. I think he was very, very well cast. There's elements of, silliness in the new series Davros that are not quite there so much in the old series. Rebuilding ripping the thing off his chest so you can see that he's been rebuilding the Daleks with his cells from his body, and the thing with those scenes in The Witch's Familiar where he opens his eyes and gets taken out of the chair, you kind of get. I found myself getting cranky with those scenes after I'd watched it and thought about, but in the moment, I thought they worked beautifully, especially the eye-opening part. I thought that was in the moment that was really good, but when I thought about it after, I thought, no, Davros never had eyes. What's all that about? That's silly. But I can kind of overlook it because the performance is so good. The particularly Capaldi and Davros, I think, work very well together. So I can forgive all the faults for that, if you can call them faults, all the things I don't like. They're not really faults; they're just things I don't like. I think he was very well cast. He's got more of a. Michael Wisher was very clipped and sort of short, sharp in his vocal delivery, and Julian Bleach has got the same kind of sound. He sounds like Michael Wisher, but he's a bit more rolling. He's a bit more sort of relaxed in his vocal delivery, but he does have a similar voice to Michael Wisher, and that's what I like about him too. Very good. Why don't we jump up out of the rabbit hole now that we've given given our opinions on the various Davroses over the years. And let's talk to one. Let's jump on with David Gooderson right now. As Doctor Who fans, our guest today is best known to us as one of the actors to have played Davros opposite Fourth Doctor Tom Baker, but he has a much more varied career than just that, which we're going to find out a lot more about now. So I'd like to welcome to the Sirens of Audio, David Gooderson. Welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great to talk to you. Now, I believe you had a very interesting start in life. You were born in what is now Pakistan.
Yes, yes, yes. It's because it was then India and it's now Pakistan. And that, yes, indeed. I was. My father was in the Indian civil service. He was a judge, a junior judge. So I started in this very hot, but I was only there till I was 4. So I don't have great memories of it, unfortunately. I wish I'd had better memories. But no, it was extraordinary beginning, really.
There are so many people who were born in India who went into the arts. I know we've spoken to Pamela Salem, who was born in India. Of course, Spike Milligan was born over there.
Yeah.
It must be the place to be for artists
Yes,
to be born.
Yes, and I know Felicity Kendall was out there a lot. I don't know if she wasn't actually born then. I'm not sure, but anyway, no, there are lots of others. No, it's great. No, it was interesting.
So, did your family return to England before the war had ended, or was it still during the war they went back?
This is a slightly long story. We came back. My mother and I. My father got very ill in India, and nearly died of typhoid. And then my mother, in the sort of strain of sort of trying to keep. Well, I was a little tiny chap, and trying to look after me and sort of keep the show on the road, as it were. And also, typhoid, he nearly died. And typhoid is a thing where you have to pull people. They just disappear. They just float off and float away. And there was a younger man, much iller than my father, who died because my mother was there every day. Come on, Dick, listen, talk to me, pulling me. And she managed to she went to the Indian High Commissioner to say that, this, your man, Gooderson, Dick, is dying of typhoid. Please, can we have someone to save him? And they got the typhoid specialist from I don't know where, and she knew all about typhoid, and she came down to specially nurse him. And with that, and my mother, who was a very determined lady, was just determined he's not going to die, and she sort of pulled him back. And she couldn't look after me, so I had to stay in the hospital as a guest of the hospital while my father was desperately ill, sort of, 2 wards away. So this did for my mother's health in a way. He got better, but then she, I think, from the strain of all this, she just got sprue, which is a thing. I think it's just a sort of form of a big form of flu. She played tennis and it was raining or something, and then she got this. And so anyway, she and I came home pretty soon after the war as medical priority, with 6,000 troops in the first troop ship home after India. My father stayed on and came back, but before partition. So we were finally reunited in 1946. So it was quite a dramatic start in some ways, although I'm totally unaware of most of it.
How did you discover that you were interested in acting? Was it a childhood thing?
Yes, I think so. I mean, my family isn't in the slightest bit interested. They were only interested in theatre. They like going to things, but apparently, going back to those very early days, I would line up my teddies in the cot and start doing little shows for them. Apparently, and when I got to be sort of 8 or 9 or 10. My cousin and I started doing plays in our living room. I just wanted to do plays. I don't know why. It just was a sort of something inside me. And I loved doing impressions. There was a very famous cricket commentator called John Arlott. And I used to do quite a good impression of this guy, I think. But I was just interested in that. And then you went to the local pantomime and saw people, and the glitter and the glamour of it all was just wonderful. And I sort of, when I went to boarding school, the only thing I wanted to do was to join the Dramatic Society. I didn't mind about anything else. So just get out there and do plays. And that sort of, so I don't know where it comes from. As I say, it doesn't come from my family. Well, they were very supportive, of course, but so right from the word go, really, yeah.
So you always had a passion for it. You ended up in Cambridge, is that right, at
Yeah,
university?
right. Yeah, Cambridge University, yes. Yeah, and there, I mean, I sort of balanced doing a tremendous amount of drama, as a lot of people who did, though, but trying to get a degree as well. So I sort of, because I was always a little bit sort of thought, I love this, but do I want to do it as a profession? I wasn't quite sure. I joined the Cambridge Footlights, which was marvelous. I became the vice president of the Footlights, and that was an amazing time. I loved comedy, and I was good at comedy. I wasn't a comedy writer, but I was good at performing comedy, and with the likes of John Cleese and Tim Brooke Taylor and people. But I didn't quite feel that was my route, because I wasn't a comedy writer and I wasn't a comedian. I was just good at doing characters, really, lots of funny little characters and strange people. So I decided to do my other love, which really was teaching, and went into teaching and taught at a school, a good school in Leeds, called Leeds Grammar School, for 2 years. And it was only then that I sort of thought, well, I am a professional at this thing. I'm not going to do sort of Rugger one day, a play every other 5 years, every 2 years, and a sort of help out with the debating society. And all the things you're supposed to do as a teacher. I must just give this thing a try. So I sort of went in, and fortunately, partly as a result of the Footlights connection, and partly because I directed some plays which were successful at the school, I got a good job at Salisbury Playhouse as an actor comes assistant director at £10 a week, which didn't seem a lot, but I managed to save a bit of money on that. It was those strange days when a pound was a lot of money, and that's why I started, and sort of felt, well, if I don't like it, I can easily stop. I'll give it up. I'll get it out of my system, but I haven't quite managed that yet. 50 years later, I'm still
because you had that career to fall back on if it didn't work out right.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Many famous people have gone through the Cambridge Footlights and an
Yes.
amazing history of comedy. Were you there with John Cleese and Tim Brooke Taylor?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was there with. Yes, I left a year after he did, so I was a bit younger, and I was, and it was a great atmosphere there. I really loved it, and in fact, it was less pressurized, I found, than the straight acting world of Cambridge, which was a bit more sort of, I don't know, not cutthroat, but kind of really, they were all heading for the West End and heading for their careers, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do all that. But the Footlights was great fun, They were funny people, and I got on very. Although I wasn't a writer, I performed well, and they liked, and I became, I said, the vice. Graham Garden was the president my last year, and I was the vice president, and we were in the Footlights Review. But even that, it wasn't my route really. so I went off to teach, and then came back into show business as it were 2 years after, as an actor, and not really as an actor come assistant director.
Comedy was really taking a new direction in the 60s at that stage.
Yes.
So what was happening in theatre at the same time in terms of everything was trying? There's so much more experimental things happening, people trying new things both in comedy and drama. Were you part of that whole movement of change?
I don't think so. Because really, I mean, the Footlights when I was there was sort of one of the reviews, the one I wasn't in, they had a great. One of the reviewers said it was inspired dottiness, and it was quite a good description actually, because it was, Cleese did a wonderful legal sketch, which was. Because he was reading law, he knew about law, but it's just silly, it's crazy, it's crazy, but it's marvelous. And inspired dottiness, I thought, absolutely summed it up. It wasn't very satirical, it wasn't sort of, it wasn't, it wasn't in the old days vulgar or rude. It was all done without it, and not even particularly full of double entendres. It was sort of, I think it was sort of. Graham, because he was a medical man, he did funny sketches about doctors, and it sort of, but it didn't. It wasn't sort of in any sense trying to be cutting edge or trying to tell the world how to be, or comedy as a sort of way of changing. And it was just funny stuff, I think, crazy sort of, which people liked, and it was great fun to do.
You were at Salisbury for 2 years.
Yeah.
Where did you go after that? Did you stick with theatre and go elsewhere, or did you start branching into things like television or radio? Which came first?
The television came quite quickly because I left Salisbury. I did 2 years there, and that was wonderful. It's the greatest training for any actor, which isn't really around there. It was called, repertory, and we did a play every fortnight, and sometimes longer at Christmas, and sometimes 3 weeks. But basically, a play every fortnight. So you played every part under the sun. From I was playing from 18, which I wasn't yet. I wasn't, and to 80, which I certainly wasn't. So very old men, very young, with beards, out and out beards, sort of, villains, funny. I mean, the absolute, which is perfect training, really. And then you discover the things you could do well and the things you weren't quite so good at. But it didn't matter because the next week we're doing something different. And it was a brilliant time. And from there, I got into television from there, and I got a good part in a series called The Mind of Mr. J.G. Reader, with an actor called Hugh Burden, and I was playing the sort of slightly edgy young man. It was a lovely part actually, because he wasn't mad, but he was a dodgy, edgy young man, which went well, and that led to a part in The Power Game, which was a big series at the time. So I had a bit of a start in telly there, which was very good. But I was still doing, going out in theatres doing rep. To answer your question, really answer your question, yes. So still going to other repertory companies. And I got married about that time, and I think my wife says I think we've moved 9 times in our first year of marriage, because we were going. I mean, it was sort of Birmingham, it was Leicester, it was Stoke-on-Trent, it was Liverpool. Short
All over the place
in lots of places. Yeah.
I guess it's probably been mentioned to you that if you've brought up Hugh Burden in the past, for Doctor Who fans, around in 1969, 1970, he was in the first Pertwee story in colour.
Yes.
I don't know if you're aware of that.
I wasn't. Well, I think I might have been, but I've forgotten it. Yeah, but no, no. He was a very good actor and it was very good to work with him early on. And yes, but I didn't really know that he was a Doctor Who, in Doctor Who as well.
Yeah. So television was still developing too.
Yeah.
What happened after that? What led you into, because you're very well known as a voice actor. So
Yes.
What led you into that area?
Well, just as often so many things, chance, or somebody knew somebody. I can't really remember, but I just through a contact, I got a part in a radio. So it wasn't a play; it was a miscellany of voices, a Christmas special or something on World Service, BBC World Service, which was then doing a lot of drama, which doesn't hardly know any now. But and I just got this radio job, and liked it, and found out, and then that led to another job. Once you get into radio, if they like you, because it's so done so quickly, they really want to employ people they know. So once you get in, it started, but slowly, to build. And I did this. There was a play called a series rather called World Theatre, which they did, and it put on an hour's play every week, I think, which went on all over the world. And in one of these, I played opposite. It was called Tobias and the Angel, and I played opposite Miriam Margolyes, which was rather wonderful, because we were both the sort of people who would not have played the part on the stage, because I was 5'7", and that, those days I think leading men had to be sort of rather taller and more sort of, and there's Miriam's square, looking exactly as she does now, only younger, with the glorious voice and wonderful personality. And so we were sort of having this love scene across the microphone in our sort of late 20s or something. And that was one of the joys of radio, that you, as a character person, as I'd been in the Footlights, you could play any part at all, as long as you could get the imagination and get the voice right. It didn't matter that you looked little or large or small or thin or fat or anything. And that sort of led to radio for... but other things as well. I mean, I was very busy, so I got into the radio drama company, which was it did, a company of 30 people. We were doing constantly radio, but you had a marvelous job again, because you had we had a paid holiday. I've never ever had it since. 2 weeks you could go off and you were actually being paid. And in that 2 years I did 207 broadcasts. So they had this massive bank of knowledge and experience. I mean, some absolutely tiny parts, some very big parts, but the whole mix which just was, again, a great experience for a character actor because you were doing all sorts of things. And that's actually what led to Doctor Who. I don't know, jumping the gun, but I mean, it was radio that got me into Doctor Who, because the director of Destiny of the Daleks, when Michael Wisher wasn't available, looked for the director, the lovely guy Ken Grieve, and he saw Davros as a radio part. He thought, well, it's because it's behind a mask. I disagree with him, actually. It's not. In the radio, you don't have to fight your way through a mask, which is quite another problem. But he looked for somebody who was experienced in radio. And I'd done sort of 250 podcasts or something like that. And I also, suddenly your height is helpful. It may not be helpful to me, but it was helpful. And I was the same size as Michael Wisher. So I would fit the costume, which is the wonderful, so the BBC, so there's an economy there. So the fact that I, had done these broadcasts, lots of them, I was very experienced and was the right size. And so it was a straight offer. There was no question of meeting him or an audition or anything like that. My agent just rang up one day and said, they want you for Doctor Who. I thought, well, I know about Doctor Who. I've seen it. But there's quite a good part this here because it's a special high fee. We had special highs and special lows. Sometimes you're on the special low, but this was a special high. So it was obviously a good part. And I had no idea of Davros. And at first I thought, well, Davros, is that some sort of Greek dancer? I had no idea who Davros was.
I like it.
but so I soon found out. But so that's what got me the job. And I at the time never really knew why. I find with jobs it's better not to sort of ask too many questions, but just do it and be pleased if they asked you. But as anyone, I met Ken years and years later when we did the commentary for the DVD, that he explained to me, why I got the job and why it was no audition or anything like that. He was quite happy, that I should do it. And yeah, what a job to get.
So tell us what it was like for going into that read through with Tom Baker. What was he like as a man to work with?
Well, everyone uses the word crazy, but I don't go the first thing I think Tom's crazy. But he's a very, absolutely larger than life, ebullient, but very friendly, very welcoming. The great thing about Tom, I think, I get on. Anyone who's friendly, you get on with, don't you? And he was immediately friendly, and I think he just. Well, part of Lalla Ward was part of it, and he just recently met Lalla, and I mean, he was in terrific form in every sense, and sort of. And on a high, I think. And so we had a marvelous time. I don't remember the read-through particularly, but I remember the rehearsal period where, as you did in the old days, where you had 10 days in a BBC studio. I mean, in a rehearsal room, I should say, not a studio, where you just learnt it as you would have a stage play, blocked it through, rehearsed it, learnt it, got through the relationships together and made the whole thing work, and then went into the studio. And I remember that as a very jolly time, and Ken was a very nice man, quite quiet, which is good because Tom then could sort of let go, But Ken was a delightful guy. And so we're a very happy little team, really, that set off and to record this thing, where, of course, you hit the problems of a mask. And, then I discovered that Ken wasn't completely correct. It was a radio part, because there you have to do a lot of acting, to push a performance and not only the voice, but the whole sort of energy of the performance through that latex helmet. And that is not a radio job at all. That's what you need your theatre's training for, actually. Which was, again,
well, there are scenes while you're actually pedaling through the scenes while you're acting as well. So
yes.
you're getting that wheelchair movement at the same time. So even more difficult, I guess.
Absolutely. And that's another thing. Radio, you don't have to worry about anything like that. No, that was quite a challenge again. Sort of, and it's the lowest tech you can imagine as you're pedaling with your feet and sort of move with your bottom and feet are the things that matter, as you're sort of trying to still look serene, a bit like a swan, I think, sort of looking serene above and pedaling like hell underneath, and trying to turn corners with it. And try not to bounce the hand, not bouncing. I mean, the phone, the paralytic hand. but it was a challenge, but an enjoyable one. Yeah.
So were you contracted for just the 2 episodes, or because they had the cliffhanger on episode 2 where you appeared, were you in it for 3? Do you recall?
I was
Was it
in,
just a
yes. I mean, you're contracted for the whole thing, for the story.
right?
Yes, I was. But
Yep.
I wasn't in episode 1, was it? It was episode. It's the end of 2, isn't it? I think it is. Yes.
Yes.
There's the
Yes.
hand and the cobwebs. Yes.
The cobwebs.
Yes. Which is
Had you known much about Doctor Who beforehand? I mean, had you seen much or any experience with it?
not really, not at all. I mean, I'd seen it because it went so bad back to 1963. But then by then I was at university. I was well into university, and I was aware of it. I think I had seen perhaps a couple of William Hartnell episodes. I'm not sure. We used to go and have tea with my grandparents, but then they always had it on, and so we watched it then. But I was aware of it, but not so, as I hadn't a clue who Davros was, and I'd heard about the Daleks, I think, but no, I was just sort of new to it all, really. Didn't know anything about the history of it particularly, because I just knew it was one of those marvelous things that had been going on and on and on, which was great.
So I had a thought before, because Douglas Adams was script editing in your season,
Yes.
but he was madly writing Hitchhikers at the same time.
Yeah.
And you made an appearance in the first episode of the Hitchhikers
Yes.
radio series, didn't
Yes.
you?
Yes.
So was that after the Doctor Who appearance?
No, it was before it. It was.
Before.
I think it was 1978. The Hitchhikers, which was just a extraordinary one morning job, wet morning in London, and sort of in the studio with this curious piece, and it was what they called a pilot episode. So depended on how this went, whether they would commission the whole thing. I think. So a lot stood on it, but as often with radio, things are very relaxed. It's not a sort of not the people don't get very uptight. Don't seem to anyway. They didn't, and they just there was a nice thing to do. Again, you sort of one of those things nice. One of the part of a rich tapestry of stuff. That's a nice morning done. Let's not know more about that either. And then it was, I think, the next year that he came into. 79 was the year of Doctor. But I don't think there was any connection. Well, I don't know. I don't think there was any connection between that and actually doing Doctor Who. But but him coming into Doctor Who made a lot of difference to the sort of program it became, because he put the jokes in, and Tom loved it, and Tom went on with his ad libs like "shut up or I'll switch you off," and offering me jelly babies and things like that. Yeah, and that altered the tone of Doctor Who, which was rather different, I gather, from the one from Genesis, which had been the first one with Davros in it.
Do you have any awareness at the time? I mean, both the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy pilot script and Death of the Daleks would both go on to become definers in lots of ways and go on and be loved for decades to come. Do you have any idea when you're doing the piece? Is this, as an actor, just go in, just do the piece, or did you see the brilliance in it at the time, or it just happens that this one clicks and this one doesn't click?
Yes. So yes. I think at the time you just thought it's another job. Really, it was just another job, and you thought of this. It's a nice thing to do. I mean, it was uncomfortable. It wasn't easy working inside this helmet thing, which was ours to put on, and then the hand. It was a tricky one, but demanding, and the studio days were quite pressurized, and I got very hot and everything. So it was a sort of. But it was great to sort of, the scenes were very good and the character was so interesting, and because I played so much comedy and sort of, and because of my size, I worked with a comedian called Les Dawson, a lot of wonderful. But I mean, I was always the sort of, you were the little man who or in commercials. I did lots of television commercials, and I was always the little guy who thanks to the product, who was looked pretty hopeless, but thanks to the product became wonderful. You sort of got the girl because you'd taken the mint, or sort of. So I was totally different from most of the parts I'd ever played. Apart from playing Macbeth at school, when I'd done all the stuff, I had done the heavy stuff at school, but so this was very different. But it was just wonderful to, and scenes with Tom, it's so marvelous having rehearsed with him that I think that's the thing that you miss nowadays. We don't get that rehearsal. You go into the studio and do it, but you haven't got the background. You haven't got that depth of rehearsal where you've sort of established the connection and really, really got on top of it. I'm sure it works out well, but it's different. Yeah.
One thing you mentioned before was that there's not much rep around anymore. So actors these days don't get that rep experience, and that's something that Philip and I have both bemoaned. That there's a certain quality of actor who went through that process of treading the boards at rep and learning their craft that way.
Yes,
they don't really sort of need to do that these days. Everything's single camera, and you just rehearse, shoot. It's very, very quick on television. Whereas back then, when you had multi-camera, there was a lot more rehearsal required. You were able to have the rehearsal even for TV.
yeah.
Do you think there's a noticeable difference in the quality of acting that we get these days compared to back in the day when there was rep available for actors upcoming?
I think there is a difference. I mean, I think a lot of it is the sort of the use of the voice, really, the part, that you kind of, you can tell, because people, you had to use your voice, and you kind of got a reasonable voice, whatever you were born with. And somehow, if you're always in front of if you're never using that voice, I think it works out, because I think a lot of television, they don't worry, they don't care about the words, do they? I mean, they just mutter, and I can't. Well, and as the hearing gets worse as you get older, I mean, I'm maddened. And when I teach, I really teach articulation. I really want to hear the end of the sentence. Why everyone go, sort of the end of the sentence sort of crashes into the ground before you've got it. And I insist. One of the things we learn is that you must articulate. You don't have to sort of sound that, but you're pedantic. But we want to hear the words. We want to hear the words if they're interesting, and they should be. Otherwise, we wouldn't be saying them. So I think that's the big difference I would notice, and just the fact of just this learning, as you put it, learning your craft and learning the whole part of the craft. Perhaps getting a character quite quickly. But again, you see, another thing that's changed is that I played a massive different number of characters on telly. I mean, I would challenge almost anyone to have a more varied life, because I have played, and there's one casting director who was quite irritated with me, because she said, "Oh, I don't know how to cast you. Every time I see you, you look different." She was quite irritable, almost as if to say, "I want to know that you're this and you're that." But I wasn't any of those things. As an actor, you're whatever you need, really, or within reason. But and on telly, which nowadays, I would never play the parts I played then. And I was looking at a bit from Bergerac the other day when I played a sort of ancient, well, he wasn't that ancient, but quite an older farmer, with sort of lots of hair and everything else. And I suddenly thought, there's no way you'd play that today. Sorry, I'm done my hair, I'm looking terrible. But they say, no. And somebody once said, I said, well, not many parts for you now, and I said, well, there's not many parts for me at the moment. And they said, oh, I don't know. I could see you as a country vet. So, country vet. I thought, yes, because you'd have to be RP, because they don't think anyway. If you wanted someone from the East End, you get someone from the East End. If you want someone from the North, you get someone from the North. I've done all these parts. American, you must get an American. Australian, you get it. I mean, at Bergerac, one reason I did that on telly was because they couldn't find anyone with a Sark accent. That's the accent, and they knew I was good at accents. So I got the telly job, although I was totally unright physically for it, because I could actually do the voice. And then they grew the hair and grew the beard, and I looked suitably sort of, farmerish, as it were.
You did a few episodes on the bill. What sort of characters were you playing on the bill?
Again, I can't really remember. There were three different characters. The first one was a guy who did a citizen's arrest with a very unpleasant sort of man. I think there was I was called Fish Hooks. And he got this guy with a fish hook. So he was a nasty bit of work, but it was a citizen's arrest. So he did it, but with a fish hook. So it was a sort of touch of Davros in that one, I think. But then the next one was some sort of a chap who someone had stolen his credit card, a little man sort of, a bit sort of from sort of, suburban London, Well, I don't know what I've done with it. What have I done with my credit card? I don't know. I just was coming home from work, and I lost my credit card. I don't know really. Quite sort of very sort of quite low, very low status, and kind of slack vowels, not RP, and and I can't remember what the third one was, but they were all. I think because I could do these quickly, and and again, you're earning a living, and if people ask you to do something, you do it on the whole. And so I managed to do one part I played that was so off now, which was again a Northamptonshire part, and I could do the Northamptonshire accent, and so I was a little guy with a sort of white vest with all the washing hanging down in a sort of very kind of humble home and simple home in the middle of and it was a police series, but I was a little man who was a local who was being accused of something or it came into the story. I can't remember how, but the character was just a really, really sort of downbeat sort of guy who had not much between the ear. So I just thought again it was such a different sort of character from absolutely the million miles from what I think I see as Nowadays, I think they say, well, you're educated, right? So you can only be maybe middle class, right? And all these pigeonholes you'd be in, and you wouldn't play any of these parts. I don't think. So that's the big difference, I think, or one of them. Yeah.
It's almost like the act of acting is gone, hasn't it? You can only play what you are, and you can't actually play someone different.
No, I think you're right about that. And I think that I don't know I can't imagine it starting now, because the whole point of being acting was to be different. The whole thing. It was boring being what you are at tea time or with grandma or with the parents, and that's boring. It's just marvelous what you. I mean, I remember when my cousin and I did plays in front of our family. We did The Fisherman's Wife. And the first thing was that I said, well, I've got to wear the dress and you've got to wear the gumboots for the fisherman, because it would be boring just me to be the fisherman and you to be the wife, because, we immediately got into a dress because that was fun and different. But the whole idea was to be what you couldn't be. And I remember at school, we did the school plays, and it was, I did my work and I was reasonable at sport, but not very good. And I got on. But on those nights of the school play, you could be this. You were up there in the lights and play Macbeth, and I mean this incredible part. It's just the power of this sort of having an audience, and then I did Arsling and Old Lace, the comedy, when I was one of the old ladies, and people laughed, and it was just it's just really fantastic. Look, I do things, and it made you different from other people. But I mean, I don't think it was in a bad way, but it was just a way that just something in you could shine, and you could be different and go into these wonderful worlds, really, of plays where being in a boarding school, it's all sort of sport and then tea and then it's homework and all that stuff. You could go into the world of the wild Scot or the funny old lady or whatever.
How many voices and how many accents do you think you can do then?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I think the thing is, again, that was all from the BBC, because they had this sound archives, and once you got involved in the BBC, then you could just go and listen to them. You can hear them, and then you can get good at them, and that's it's if you've got a good ear. I'm not basically a musician. I can sing a bit and I can play a bit, but I mean basically I've got a very good ear, and if you've got a good ear, you can do. And therefore, almost to act, I think you have to have a good ear, and therefore, if you work at it, you can do accents, because you just listen to them, and you can, hear them, and then repeat it.
How's your Australian?
No, I've never done Australian. I don't know. No, well, I don't know. I'm not sure about that at all. I don't know. I'll have a go some. If you give me a part for me, not a part for me, I'll have a try. Give it a try.
Very good. Now, besides the acting, you've turned your hand to writing too. When did that start?
Well, again, very early on. I love historical novels, and I love Agatha Christie and all these things. And immediately, I think if you really love them, you want to imitate them. And I sort of again from quite an early age started writing little sort of my own sort of detective story. I never finished it, but I started, and my own sort of versions of the historical novel that I liked. it was a different story, but it would be sort of in the same vein, and sort of always was aware. And then I started writing poetry gently, but just want the urge to write something. And as soon as when I taught in the school for 2 years, I thought, oh, there's a novel here, but I was far too exhausted from teaching and the whole thing to write it. But I was sort of feeling, and when I started in the acting business, after my 2 years at Salisbury, when I was first out of work, I thought, well, this is the moment. You've got time. There's nobody wanting you. You said you wanted to write. Now get on and write something, and this is your chance. And sort of survived, and slowly but surely, I've sort of developed that into a second string, really, so that if I'm out of work, I try to think of myself not as an out of work actor, but as an in work writer, and use this opportunity to produce something. This is how it started was quite interesting, but because first of all, I started on a sort of little story that I thought I knew, based on something that happened to me, and that was I tried it, and then I found a real life story that absolutely gripped me, and it was not a very likely story, but it was the story of a poet called William Cowper, spelt Cowper, in the 18th century, who was a funny guy who wrote a very famous poem called John Gilpin, which I think that now was very famous once. I don't think people know it now. But so he was a mixture of comedy, but he had a terrible depression that hit him. And he sort of so he veered from this sort of comedy, outwardly funny, but inwardly sort of tormented. And one time I was out of work when we moved to the country, and was in my parents' cottage because we couldn't afford to live in London, and I was out of work, and I was in the depths of the countryside, and I felt completely isolated. And I remembered the story of this guy, and I read his biography, and I suddenly absolutely thought, I want to tell this story because this isn't me completely, but it's a bit of me in this, because I was quietly felt I was going mad in the country, quietly, sort of because I didn't have friends out there. We were in the lovely countryside. We went for walks. We were happily married. There were no problem. But I went to London for auditions, and I think I did the BBC audition actually from that cottage. But this feeling of sort of I could suddenly empathise with going mad quietly in the country, which is what Cooper's story was. And so as soon as I got back, I thought, I'm going to try and write this story for television. It didn't work for telly. Nobody wanted it. Couldn't get it involved. But then one night I got the idea of doing it it just sort of hit me, one-man show. Do it on the stage. And suddenly the idea gelled, and I don't want to go on and on, but it gelled into a good one-man show, which I've done 60 or 70 times in various parts of the country. And it was something I could act well, and it was fun because I could act from jolly young man, through to older man, and sort of sad end, and which was interesting acting. But it also worked, and I could realise I could actually write for the stage. It was, as I say it myself, it was a good piece of work. And in fact, they took a version for BBC television, which was, the first thing that was written that went to telly. So they took a slice of it, and they said, could you adapt it? So I did a short version for BBC TV, which was marvellous. And so I suddenly thought, I know what I want to write about now. I like true stories. I find a true story that grips me in some way or other. And that's what I don't worry about, think of some incident miles away. That's what I do. I do true stories, and I try to tell them dramatically and effectively. So that was my sort of, and from then on, I found other true stories, of course, that were effective. And I mean, I haven't hit the heights as a writer, but all my stuff have been done, which is something. And I've got a lot of enjoyment out of writing. I love writing, actually, and it's a wonderful sort of alternative to acting. It's sort of the other side of you. When you've written for too long, you're longing to get back on the stage. Other times you think longing to do a bit of scribbling.
I did hear one of your radio plays. I found it today, and I was giving it a listen. It was called the Killing of Mr. Toad.
You found it. Yeah.
That was based on a true story, wasn't it?
Absolutely, yes. where did you find? I must. Where did you find it? Was it because I thought
I found it. It's actually on YouTube. It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. It's the whole
And
thing.
what interested me is that it's starring Edward Hardwicke, and I'm a huge fan of Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes. So I thought, oh, Edward Hardwicke, excellent. I'll give that a listen. So
So it's on YouTube.
that was. It is.
Yeah. Well, that was an amazing. Yes, that was. I couldn't believe it when I found that story. I mean, I wrote it first for the stage, and the stage play, is there and it's published and so on. But and as a result of being in radio, acting, a producer picked up his ears and said, "Well, that sounds interesting. What you doing? What's that play about?" And so that led to him writing and adapting it for radio, which was a great experience of working with these marvelous people. And he was the director loved the play, and it's done very well actually. Yeah. It was such an incredible story. And I'm still using chunks of it to teach with, actually. So the play is still going on, because with one particular workshop production I do because it's again a mixture, which I love, is the tragicomedy. That's what I love about that story, that you've got the comedy of The Wind and the Willows, the comedy of Toad, and then the idea that this jolly little boy, becomes for our great comic hero, turns out into a sort of tragic hero, or rather not a hero, but a tragic case, whatever you call it. And in this extraordinary story, how his whole life is sort of ruined, really, by his parents. And the father is this man who wrote this masterpiece. Just the story was such a riveting story that I thought, well, I'm almost never going to find a better story than this, actually. I know I have found other stories, but it is an amazing story. And as I say, I still teach because I think it's got that mixture of comedy and tragedy, which I think, again, is what appeals to me.
So you teach as well. So you act, you write, and you teach the craft as well.
Yeah, that's the third part of of my life, really, professional life. And that came, that came about because somebody couldn't do a teaching. It's like of these things, somebody drops through the hole in the floor and they say, "Can you do it? Will you take over?" And you do it, and you find you like it, and they like you, and so you go on doing it. And this was teaching students at Guildford School of Acting in radio technique and so on. And I was a bit daunted at first because I thought, well, I've done a teaching qualification, but I know how to do radio, but it's an instinctive thing. I haven't been taught how to do radio. I just did it. I mean, I just learned by doing it and experience and getting it wrong sometimes, and then hopefully getting it right more times you got it wrong. But I thought, well, all right, great, get its money, it's work. But since then, I've really loved doing it, and I've learned how to teach it and look at it from other points of view. And because I'm experienced in both writing for radio and acting on acting on the radio, I'm actually quite a good radio teacher because I really know the staff, my staff, and so I'm still working with students, teaching them this at a FE college in London. And this is a marvelous sort of thing that started literally 30 years ago, and that's been a sort of little extra going along, and is now becoming a sort of quite a central feature of my life, really, because I'm doing more courses. And despite the years, they don't seem to mind. They're not bothered about that. If you can turn up and do the job, they're happy enough. That's the third sort of string, if you see what I mean.
Well, speaking of radio technique, we are aware that doing radio recordings for someone like the BBC are quite different to doing recordings for Big Finish. And you did do a few recordings for Big Finish a few years ago. Yes. What are your memories of those recordings? Elizabeth Sladen, of course. Yeah. You worked on Sarah Jane Smith. Yes. What are your memories of that and the differences between that and other radio recordings that you've done?
Well, that time we were... always at the BBC, you work with a single mic, nearly always. And it's not like everybody, but suddenly for the first time, and it was almost the first time, I think, when we were all on single mics. We all had a mic, and we were in a music studio, and so we were all lined up, the five of us who were in the scene. I can't remember how many, but 4 or 5 people in the thing, and we all each had our mic, and the mic was there in front of us, and there was the control room in front of us, and we would do our bit. We couldn't see each other because we would. But we could hear each other, And so that was one of the first times that I'd ever worked without seeing the other people, although you don't concentrate on them, but not being with them in the same. But so it was all done through the ears, and in a way that is the way we do things now, don't we? I mean, it's all like that. I worked on Audible recently, and again, it was the same idea, but in a studio, a purpose-built studio, where it was like a bar, and there were microphones all round, and each person just sort of had a space, and you had your mic, and you could hear the other people, obviously, but you couldn't see them. I mean, there were no vision, but you felt quite sort of cut off from them in a weird way, because in the old days of the BBC, where everybody was, well, Miriam and me were opposite each other on the when it was a mono mic. We were facing each other, so we were making passionate love so across the piece of metal. And then stereo came in, and we were in what they call the stereo arc, and we all had to learn to be. You were on your arc, and you had your passageway through to this mic. But so again, people were around you, but you weren't really looking at them. And now, of course, it's so much like. Single mics and working individually and separately in your own booth or wherever you are. I don't know whether I haven't done a big finish for a little while, so I don't know how they work nowadays. But it was a lovely experience. I mean, but they always give you lunch, which is fabulous. We had a lovely lunch, I remember, and I mean, Liz was so sweet. I mean, I think she got me that because I'd said to her I'd love to do some big finish, and she said, "I'll get you a big finish," So I came and did one, and I was aware that, of course, my career in big finish might be, well, I don't know. Obviously, Terry was being Davros, and that was absolutely fine. I mean, you can't have two Davroses, and he was being the Davros at the time, and absolutely fair enough. So I would obviously like to do more big finish because I really enjoyed it. But you wait for the call, don't you?
One of the roles that you really stand out to you in terms of brought you the most joy, you remember the best.
It's so difficult, isn't it? There's so many and so different things. I mean, one of the most, I suppose, the most demanding but interesting, possibly, was being in When the Wind Blows. I don't know if you know When the Wind Blows was written. And it was sort of, again, a mixture of comedy. It started with these a little couple, who get caught up in a nuclear explosion. I mean, it's quite grim to think about it, but it was an incredible thing to be in because you started with this light comedy, really, not exactly elderly, but sort of late middle-aged couple, sort of slightly getting with each other, and there's some nice laughs from the comedy of that. And then the thing happens, and you see these people literally being exterminated by this explosion. And I remember the set, we did it, and the set was sort of, they did an amazing set in the interval or wherever it was. They sort of put everything you can imagine on the stage, and it looked like the chaos that we see on our screens, except that it was indoors. And from this, we ended up in this little tent at the end, and we didn't even have a curtain call because, well, you can't have a curtain call at the end of the world. You can't then stand up and start bowing. We were gone, as it were, and you had to go. And the director and we both all agreed that there was no way you would have a curtain call. You can't suddenly stand up and say, "Wasn't that jolly and how much fun?" It was such a searing piece to do. So I think of all the things I've done, it's probably, I don't know, it's the most enjoyable, but the most challenging, and you felt sort of. And it was such hard work to do that night after night because you have to sort of get into this. And that's the hard thing about stage acting. You've got to sort of get into it. You can't, you've got to find a way in every performance because, well, at least I can't. I don't know. Some people are very technical. I'm not. And, with my one-man show, was one night when I didn't get in. And I thought, I never got into this thing. I mean, it went all right. Nobody wanted their money back. It was all right. But I knew I hadn't got into it. I wasn't there quite. That's so frustrating.
Now you mentioned that Terry was doing Davros for Big Finish, yeah. but you've played Davros again more recently.
Do you mean on the box set? Yes,
that's right.
Which was wonderful. I mean, that was an absolute joy. I mean, Pete McTighe wrote this lovely little piece, and I was actually thrilled to bits, obviously, to do it again. Terry and I get on very well, and that's. I've never met Julian Bleach, I never met Michael Wisher, but Terry and I get on, and I tremendously admire all that he's done for that character, and and his excellent performances. But when given a chance to do a bit myself, I really did enjoy that. Yes, I did, and fans mention it, so it must. I think it went all right. Yeah, I managed to find it again, and in fact, I'm not sure that my voice wasn't a bit deeper, because my voice has got better over the years. Actually, I think it's interesting. I don't know. In teaching, I found my voice has improved. I don't know. It's just life. It doesn't always have to go the wrong way.
You're learning well from the lessons.
Yes, that's right. I'm using my voice to sort of it helps them, perhaps. I don't know. No, I love doing that.
Now,
anyway.
in terms of your writing, you have a bit of an Australian connection too. You did a couple of adaptations of Wind in the Willows. There was a longer version and a shorter version, right?
That's right.
And was it the shorter version that got performed in Australia just in the last
Yes,
couple of years?
Yes, by Rava Productions, based in Toowoomba, and it went round the last time.
Of all places.
Sorry. No,
of all places, Toowoomba.
All places, yes, yes. I didn't feel right to say that, but it did seem I couldn't find it on the map. I didn't know where it was. I'd never heard of it. But they, and that's where the company is based. And I think it was 2 or 3 years ago they did a tour around Queensland, which was marvelous. And I heard about it from a writing friend who was out in Australia, and it would be lovely to have seen it, but I was busy anyway, and that wasn't possible at all. But no, I think it went well, and it was funny to see these characters that are so English, with this sort of, it's quintessentially English, aren't they? Quintessentially English, and suddenly there was a lovely little sort of a wonderful Aussie toad, it's fantastic, it was fantastic sort of seeing and hearing that voice, on Toad, it was wonderful. So it was exciting to feel that, because in a way he'd be a brilliant Aussie, it's sort of larger than, the traditional idea of an Aussie, sort of larger than life, perhaps, and just sort of really knowing it all, Yeah, it was great to see that happen, or not to see it happen, but it did happen.
What an amazing career, though! And I mean, you've done lots of things I love, like
Also.
Tinko. I've been looking through the TV list you've done, all the big hit BBC shows. You've done something in.
Yes, Touch of Frost was another one that had. It was the one that I was most sort of possibly known for. Very different from Davros' character. But no, I think that's been one of the joys. And Map and Lucia was a lovely one to do, which is a bit of a niche thing, I think. But people suddenly say you were in that, and no, I think that's one of the lovely things. I had a huge variety, which has been marvelous.
Thanks for sharing it with us. So I say, with all your full range of accents, it's high time that Big Finish got you in something else. So
me too.
I'm putting it out there right now.
Right, so thank you very much.
We need some Australians in there.
Australians.
All right, David, thank you very much for coming on and sharing those stories with us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, and very nice to talk to you. So cheers for now.
It's all very well to make these demands, but Doctor Who fans already have a plethora of podcasts to choose from.
I created the show you host on your platforms. I have a right to the subscription.
I'm well aware of that, great podcaster. I would willingly get this fan to write 1,000 reviews if Apple Podcasts allowed it.
And I would write them willingly.
You see how devoted we are. But you'd get very little for him writing a review or subscribing. And I would be without a good anorak. Good anoraks are very hard to find.
I do not wish to hear any more from your prattling tongue. Forgive me. I need more subscribers. I cannot reach more audience without them.
We'll do our best for you. I'm sure Anorak can engage in a little creative bot activity on your behalf.
I already do, madam. I'm a past master at the double entry.
Then you must make it triple. You heard what audiophile said. He needs the subscribers.
Do not call me by my name on an open channel.
I'm so sorry, great podcaster. Such is my enthusiasm for your cause, my tongue sometimes speaks what my mind would not dare to think. Please accept my apologies.
I would sooner accept your
subscription.
Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha.
All right, fantastic to hear from David. Philip?
Yeah, he's such an interesting man. Lovely stories. I would have loved to talk a lot more about his India days, early days with the Footlights, and being friends with John Cleese and Graham Garden. And I was thinking, oh, the goodies! I love the goodies. I'd love to have heard more stories.
All those people he was rubbing shoulders with.
I know,
incredible.
just lack of time to talk more, but never mind.
Very good. All right, let's give some recommendations now. What I'd like to actually I can't because I'm just looking at my list. Here it is, and it says it's your turn to go first.
My turn. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Huh, okay.
Well, that's what the list says.
I know. I've been watching lots of TV recently, which you may have picked up on. Much more so listening, and I'm so far behind my Big Finish. I need to do some major Big Finish listening. I don't think I've mentioned this one. Ted Lasso. I've discovered recently, my wife and I are watching Ted Lasso together. I don't know if people know it at all. It's an American football coach who gets hired by an English soccer team to come over to coach the soccer team. What Ted Lasso doesn't know is the manager of the team is trying to destroy the team because she hates her husband, who she's won the team in the divorce, and she wants to destroy the team to make her ex-husband suffer. And that's why she's hired Ted, because Ted comes with all his winning ways and starts to turn the team around. But it is just the most gorgeous bunch of characters. Like, they are all so unique and distinct, and you just love them all. It's just one of those shows where you feel better at the end of every episode because of how they handle the characters. So it's very funny. Laugh out loud, all sorts of bits and pieces. I'm almost finished the second season. I think there's a third to go at the moment. I know they're making more. But Ted Lasso, it's on Netflix. I've been enjoying it. What about you, Dwayne?
Yeah, I must check out Ted Lasso. I've heard people talking about it for years and just never got round to it. Well, during our chat with David, we mentioned the killing of Mr. Toad. So I'll put a link down below to the radio play where you can listen to that. I've listened to that today and enjoyed it. I love Edward Hardwicke. He stars in that, and a very distinctive voice. I love him as Watson as well in the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes. But I've been watching TV too, but lots of old TV. And a couple of months back, we were talking with Rob Valentine, and he intrigued me with some of his comments about what they were doing with The Fugitive Doctor. And he mentioned the TV series The Fugitive and some elements from that were being used in The Fugitive Doctor. So I acquired the Fugitive, and I've started watching that. What a gripping show. I don't know if you've seen it runs for 4 seasons. There's 30 episodes per season. It's going to take me years to get through it. But the first 3 seasons are in black and white. The last one's in color. And it's a really gripping show. Barry Morse plays the Tommy Lee Jones character from the movie, who's the guy chasing the fugitive.
Is he never? Is
so
he
we know
every
Barry
episode
Morse.
Or not?
He's not in every single episode.
No.
But he's in most of them, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the One-Armed Man comes up a bit later down the track too. But I'm only a few episodes in. But it's really gripping stuff. I've loved it. And I'm just going through my 60s American classics right now, and that's what's been keeping me busy and keeping me way behind on my Big Finish. Whoops.
You know what? I realised we need to do an episode on some point too. Having talked to just David, then we need to do the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
We do.
Because I love that show, and my father and I used to listen to it when it first came out years and years ago. So it's got lots of very fond memories for me, and it's just brilliant. So we should, at some stage,
I much prefer the radio series to the TV series as well. Love the TV series too, but I have always preferred the radio series.
Yeah, much better
myself. So I agree. We should. All right, that's all for today. As always, Philip, been wonderful to be in your company. Thank you.
Been great to be with you as well. Thank you, Dwayne.
And we will catch you all next time.
Bye, everyone.
This has been the Sirens of Audio, the Destiny of Davros, with our guest David Gooderson and your hosts Philip Edney and Dwayne Bunny. Theme music by Joe Kramer. Catch up with all the latest info, including news on our live events, at sirensofaudio.com. Got some feedback? Send your emails to sirensofaudio@gmail.com, or you can find us on all our social media at Audio Sirens. Thanks for listening, audiophiles. We'll hear you next time. If there was one tip that you would give someone as a radio actor that was vital for working the mic, what would it be? What's your number one tip?
I think probably you would assume that they would find the technique for themselves. Is that I think that you've got to get the character into your head before you start, because because it's all on a page. The great thing, the phrase they always use is "get it off the page," because it's reading it, but you mustn't sound as if you're reading it. So to get that sort of the character, it's also in imagination. I mean, and you have to have imagination, I think, to sort of to really use your imagination, which is how you can get the thing off the page and into your head or into your body as well, partly into your body, which will then transmit into the microphone.